الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. اللهم لا علم لنا إلا ما علمتنا إنك أنت العليم الحكيم. اللهم علمنا ما ينفعنا وانفعنا بما علمتنا وزدنا علما. اللهم افتح إلينا حكمتك وانشر علينا رحمتك يا ذا الجلال والإكرام. ونعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. Sorry, where did we leave off?
We were talking about something about language and how behind the shapes and images, the true essence of what they feel or can be translated by what they show.
It's actually a lot more complex. I think this will be best when we do Ghazali's Mishkat al-Anwar, because he explains the different faculties of the mind. So there is a component of the mind, a faculty called the imaginative faculty, that is where, when you receive information from the outside, from your senses, they get processed by the brain. The brain processes the information received in terms of, say, what's the wavelength, what's the intensity of the light, what's the color, what's the texture, and all those components, and forms a data sheet. I'm just using those terms. The mind interprets that data sheet, and if it has learned to recognize that information and interpret it, it does it intuitively without having to give it much thought. So what the imaginative faculty does is it builds what would be defined as crude shapes and forms in the imagination. So when I'm using words right now, I'm talking about things that you can't actually see in your field of view, but you recognize the words that I'm using. And using those words, since you understand what they mean, your mind is able to form these shapes and structures in your imaginative faculty, so you can put pieces together. The more refined your understanding, the clearer the image is. In most cases of possession, where the Jinn settles in the brain area, they tend to sort of interfere with that information processing. They make changes to that information, or alterations, so that you start seeing things that are not exactly as they are in reality. In other words, they're showing you things that don't exist in your field of view. So you could be looking at, say you're in a room and you're looking at all your furniture, but then what you're seeing in your mind is the beach and the waves, and you're actually hearing them. So they're basically inserting all this data and information in between your senses and your brain, or your brain and your mind, and sort of driving a wedge in between to show you something that doesn't actually exist. And your mind does not know or is not aware, especially for people with a weak spiritual state or hal, or a weak heart, because the mind is in the heart. And someone who has a weak heart might not be able to really recognize that they're being deceived. And there's a deception taking place, and what they're seeing is not actually what it is.
It was like a virus, it was like when people take the hallucinogen, it's like a certain level you take, and basically they say you're breaking the veil. So once you break that veil, you start getting sleepy, and then slowly doze off to sleep, and then you have a dream, which is, it's not, you're not causing this dream. It's like it's coming to you like a message, basically. And the first time you see it, you're like, wow, you're like, wow, this is so special. Everything, all this. And then the second time you do it, you can see it's a program. It's like a program has been installed, and you're literally just going with the program. And then later, when I went to these forums and stuff, talking to people, and then I basically negated what they're saying to other people, spreading their message.
Mm-hmm.
It's like a message they're spreading now. And then they're like, oh, you didn't get past the hell part, basically. So it's a hellish thing they show, and then after you accept it, then it shows like a heavenly expansion.
Yeah.
So people like the first time, if you accept it, you will have that heavenly expansion. You'll come out like a Messiah. Oh, I'm this, I'm that, and after change the world, and I quit.
Yeah. So that's that in psychology. I know what you're talking about. That in psychology is known as the Messiah complex.
Yeah, the deception. The people who see it, yeah, then they stay and then they call it, oh, you had a bad trip. But no, you actually saw the deception and the hellish and the shaitan influence and you rejected it. And then they're like, oh no, you couldn't handle it. But actually, they're the ones who have been brainwashed, basically, what Allah's talking about. It's like the fire they're lighting, and then they got enlightenment while Allah leaves in the darkness. It was like, that's literally what it felt like when I almost accepted it. I was just like, that was like, if I had any description of what it was simply Dajjal. It was simply a dimension that takes you and it shows you a message, and if you accept it, it gives you all this knowledge and all this like stuff. And it's just, if this goes out, which I know where the signs are leading. Basically, right now they just legalize marijuana everywhere, and I know that 1970s, before the war on Muslims, they did the war on spiritual drugs, the LSD, mushrooms, and that Schedule 1. When they legalized those and start using those, we will literally have people, doctors, administering the jazz religion into people's minds, and them all having being enlightened. And this is the vaccines. Who knows? Maybe they can literally inject literally LSD into your like. It's just thinking about that and how the Jinn can influence us, or whatever that was, how it can influence us through simply chemicals, is enough proof that the vaccines and how they're created is just.
No, but you have to be careful, because you could end up getting into a slippery slope argument. You're basically just going with one thing leading onto another. The main component there that you're talking about, where you said about you didn't accept it or you rejected it, the acceptance and the rejection is the consciousness itself. The consciousness is what has the ability to accept and reject, or to affirm and negate. In those cases, the consciousness is reliant on what information is received through the senses for it to build a valid ratification of whether it will accept something or reject something. And if the consciousness is veiled, and this is why alcohol is prohibited, why intoxicants are prohibited, because they veil the consciousness. They veil the consciousness from true reality. This is a reality. It is true in its own respect. It's a true reality. And you have to be consciously aware of this reality to make the right decisions. You need to be, for lack of a better term, you have to be sober to make the right decisions. If you're intoxicated, and that's what they say, you're impaired, or your ability to make decisions is impaired. And any intoxicant that is put into the body will induce a state whereby the consciousness is impaired. So what you're seeing isn't necessarily true. And so you cannot affirm its truth, nor can you deny its falsity. You don't know which is which. So the best way to experience the truth is to be consciously aware. And this is why prayer, salah, is not a spiritual action. It's not something you just do in your heart or in your mind. Your body has to participate, and you have to be consciously aware of your surroundings. You have to be consciously aware of what you're wearing, how clean you are, what are your hands doing, where are you looking, what are your eyes doing, how are your lips moving. You need to, some say that you should be reciting audibly enough for you to hear yourself, because you need to be consciously aware. And salah is the highest spiritual experience, and yet it has to be experienced in the dhahiri state, in full sobriety. So, I mean, I know these guys can argue on their side that you can take these intoxicants and experience a different reality. But I would argue that's not a true reality, because 99% of the images you see are all distorted. What you're looking at is not actual reality. You think you might be seeing something of a different world, but you're actually just looking at the same world. You're just seeing different things and you're receiving different information because you're no longer in tune with reality. And I think, I don't know if he kind of touches on that a little bit. Actually, he does in the same section. Yeah. No, he gives the concepts, like I said, he actually just touches on the concept, but he says that in the third paragraph of this section here. So I'd say let's continue. But that particular portion that you really want to target, it's got more to do with the mind itself. So inshallah, when we get to Mishkat al-Anwar, which is a longer book, but you can get the translations of that book, and they're very good translations, like the one that's published by Fons Vitae is a good translation. It's got issues with some technical terms here and there, but it's a good translation. The Niche of Lights. I think I have one here. This costed me like $30. It's translated by David Bushman. It's good because it's got the Arabic on one page, and then he's got his translation on the other. So you could compare the terms and words and see what works. But it's a good translation. It's complex, so you'll have to like go through it maybe a couple of times until you actually get a grasp of the concepts he's talking about. But inshallah, we'll do the text as well, and you'll better understand exactly how the mind works. So this particular component of intoxication, I think you'll be able to understand it better once you understand exactly how the mind itself works. So inshallah, let's proceed on the next, unless there's any other questions.
Yeah, you were talking about the creative form and the essential form, and you said that the parts of the creative form is reading, listening, and speaking.
Yeah.
And then, so what's the parts of the essential form?
The parts of the essential form is the meaning itself. So the outward language that comes out, whether it's in English or Arabic or whichever semantic form or field it will take, has got a meaning embedded to each word. It's not just sounds that we're making. Each word has a meaning, and that meaning is not something you can see. That's the essential form of the language. So in all language, human speech, you'll find universal elements that define language itself. So in the Arabic, Imam Ali said that أقسام اللغة ثلاثة اسم وفعل وحرف فانهوا هذا النحو. Language or speech, he said, has got three components: the noun, the verb, and the preposition. So you've got the object, what that object is doing, and the thing or the word that defines the state of the action and the object. So did he do it in something, on top of something, under something, behind something? Those are all propositions: in, behind, under, on top. The doing is the action, and then the object or the subject is the person or the individual who is doing that action. And that's the noun, the verb, and the preposition. So you'll find this as a blueprint in almost every language. Every language has got these three components. That's the essence of the language, or the essential form of the language. We are interpreting, and we are all interpretive beings. We are interpreting things, what those things are doing, or what's being done to the things, and in what location or time interval that the narrative is taking place. And prepositions are usually divided into what in Arabic are known as huruf al-makan and huruf al-zaman. And then there are dhuruf al-zaman and dhuruf al-makan. So with time and location, with respect to time or location. So either something is on the table or it's under the table. That's a location. It was in the morning and then it happened in the afternoon. That's a component of time. The essence of the language is in understanding all these elements. How do you interpret location or space? How do you interpret time? And then how do you interpret what an object is? So when you're asking about something, you ask, what is it? What is this object? And then you understand what that object is in its inward form, not its outward form. That's the essence of the language. So you take the it and you conceptualize it. Oh, that's what it is. Okay. Now you've got an image in your mind. If I want to tell you about this image and it doesn't exist in our vicinity, what I have is language in its essence. I have a form in my mind, a concept. How do I show you what that thing is in my mind? Because you can't see inside my mind. I can use language. I can use a word which is a symbol and is made up of multiple symbols within it that you comprehend and I comprehend. We both know what that word means. And then I can associate that word, which is the outward created form of the language, attach it to the inward form of the language in my mind, and put the two together to tell you this is what I'm thinking about. This is what's in my mind. Get it? And this is why there's a difference between Quran and Kitab. The Kitab is the written or the inscription itself. That's what's contained in the Mus'haf. But then embedded into each of those words is the Quran. The Quran is the speech of Allah. That speech is the inner essence. It's the thing that's in Him. It came from Him. Right? And then it manifested into this world. And the same case applies to the human being. The speech is in you. You have the ability to speak. It's an ability. When you execute it, that's when it becomes a manifestation. And you can execute it as through sound or through visual representation, like writing it. You can draw it out, right? You can sing it out. You can give it a different tone or melody. Whatever use or means you use, that's the outward form of the language. Does that make sense, or have I confused you completely?
You said the outward form of the language is the ability to speak it, to write it, and what was the inward form? The ability to do it?
To conceptualize it.
Conceptualize.
Yeah. All right. So, clear example. We're talking about Ghazali saying this, but Ghazali is not actually the one. Ghazali is not the one who is saying this. We're just reading what he said. But he didn't actually say it. He wrote it. So he took it out from his mind and he put it on the pages. But he's no longer in our presence. So how do we know what he's saying? We look at the word and we both have, Ghazali and I both have the same understanding of the meaning of that word. Because we studied the same sciences of the language. So we both have a common understanding. So if he says, Kaifa ta'rifu nafsak. I know that Kaifa means how, and ta'rifu means you know, and nafsaka, your nafs. So I know that he's saying, how would you know your nafs? All right. So what we're looking at is the created form of the language. What he would have been thinking about would have been the concept in his mind. And then he brought it out of himself and put it on paper. So that the inner language in essence, and that's the outer language in script or in writ. That's now taken shape and form and character and everything.
Could that also be like akin to how Allah talked about before the creation of the dunya, we like thought about it, or what words he said 50,000 years before dunya, it was already like conceptualized, or
That's a tricky one, because again we go back to the aqidah portion of it and say laysa kamithlihi shay'. There's nothing like unto him. So if we start thinking about it or conceptualizing it, we're referring to how we think and conceptualize, and we cannot attribute the same notion to him. All we say is that ala lahul khalq wal amr, or amr wal khalq. To him belong the created form and the amr through which he ordained that created form. He's not affected by time. Humans are affected by time. So between getting the idea and thinking it out and planning it, there is a time interval that passes. We're bound by that. We cannot build a thought at completion. Right? You're following me now, right? Yeah, we can't actually build a thought from completion. We actually have to go through the process, put all the components together. But with him, it's he knows it, and he knows it in its complete form, and he knows everything about it in that same instance.
That's how Shaitan utilizes time. Like you think the action you did, but it was a long time ago, that first whisper.
Yeah, you think it just came to you right now, but it's actually been stirring in your mind for a while now. It almost seems like there's actually no connection you can see between the original whisper and what's now because it's taken all these twists and turns and left, rights and everything.
This coronavirus, it's been already implanted in their minds that it's going to happen with all these,
movies and everything. Right. Now you're actually understanding the psychological aspect of it. How that, what is it called? Something programming. Preemptive programming works. It starts from a long time ago that seems almost harmless, or it's nothing correlated to any such, and then all of a sudden now, here is the reality of it taking place. And turns out that you have actually been programmed. Now, what does the program mean? That's what it means. And it's just a constant waswasa that has been done steadily, very slowly, and very subtly, so that it doesn't actually affect you. And you accept it because it doesn't conflict the truth. You accept it. Oh, it's just fiction. Okay, so it's not the truth. Okay, no problem. But you accept it nonetheless. Now there's a reality, and you see certain people are conversant with that because they accepted that as reality as well. But then other people, because they rejected that as a reality, they said it's fiction. Now this is reality taking place. They are in opposition to it because it's not the truth. What we have been shown all this time has been a lie. Get it? Yeah.
There's a metaphor, like the person that takes the psychedelics, the vision they see, the people that say, oh, I accept it. It's the same thing with the coronavirus. The virus came out, be fearful, take this vaccine. It's the same thing.
Yeah, accept it. So they keep shouting the same lie. Eventually, it seems to be the truth.
Big lie.
And people don't see that, so they accept it as the truth. Yeah. Anyway, we're getting sidetracked on different tangents. I wanted to finish this portion. Then we can go to the other one. So, Bismillah, he says in the second chapter, كيف تعرف نفسك? How would you know yourself? He says, إذا شئت أن تعرف نفسك فاعلم أنك من شيئين. الأول هذا قلب والثاني يسمى النفس والروح. So he's making two distinguishments here. He's saying that the first of these components of knowing yourself is through the heart. And the second of these components is, we call it the nafs or the ruh. And this is where he's now going to use them interchangeably, because he's not specifically targeting this second portion. In this book, he's not talking about the ruh or the nafs in specificity. He's talking about the qalb. That's why he's put the ruh and nafs as a separate category by itself, because that has its own study as far as what the nafs is, what are its dimensions, its groupings, its different layouts on a spectrum, for instance, where a person can go from one hal to another. The same applies to the ruh, different kinds of ruh. What is the ruh given to mankind? What is Ruh al-Qudus? What does Ruh Allah mean in reference to Nabi Isa? So these are different sciences. I mean, so these different terms in the respective science. So what he's targeting here is the component of the qalb itself. So he's saying, وَالنَّفْسُ هُوَ الْقَلْبُ الَّذِي تَعْرِفُهُ بِعَيْنِ الْبَاطِنِ. The nafs is the qalb when you perceive it with the inward eye. When you look with the inward eye, you are referring to the qalb, you're referring to the heart. And that's what is meant by the heart can see. In the Quran, he says, Allah, it is not that their eyes are blind, it's the heart that is blind, meaning the heart can see. So when you're looking with this inward eye, that's what you're referring to as the inner eye. It's the heart. It negates the theory of the pineal gland component entirely, because in the Islamic sciences, that's not the inner eye. The inward eye, the Ayn al-Batin, this is the term he's using, is the heart. Wa haqiqatuka al-batin, your reality is the heart, is the inward. Your reality is the inward reality, not this outward form. This outward form is a vessel. لأن الجسد أول وهو الآخر والنفس آخر وهو الأول ويسمى قلب. Your body is the first, the heart is last. And your nafs is the last, and the heart is first. It's a bit of a wordplay he's doing. In other words, the heart is the first thing, and it's also the last thing. And that is to say that the heart was the first thing about the human being that was created. And then the nafs was created to house the heart, and then the body was created to house the nafs. So the nafs is in the body, and the heart is in the nafs. And the last thing, because you're going to leave this body behind, the last thing is the heart, because it's the heart that carries on. It is the heart that contains all your memories, all your thoughts, all your emotions, your understandings, everything that you experience in this reality is in the heart, the spiritual heart. It's not in the brain. It's not in the fleshy organ of the heart. So all these people in their laboratories breaking open people's skull to see if they can find out what the last memory was and what this person experienced in their life, I don't know what they're doing. It's a waste of time. وليس القلب هذه القطعة اللحمية التي في الصدر من جانب الأيسر لأنه يكون في الدواب والموتى. He's saying that the heart is not this fleshy organ that you have in the chest. That's something that beasts and animals have, and dead people also have that. That's not what he's referring to as the heart. He's saying it's not the fleshy organ. وَكُلَّ شَيْءٍ تُبْصِرُهُ بِعَيْنِ الظَّاهِرَ فَهُوَ مِنْ هَذَا الْعَالَمِ الَّذِي يُسَمَّى عَالَمَ الشَّهَادَةِ. Everything that you see with your outward eye, عَيْنِ الظَّاهِرَ, the outward eye, is from this realm, this world. And we call this the world of the عالم الشهادة. The realm of observing, the observable world or the observable universe in contemporary terms. It's the same thing. Alam al-Shahada is the observable world or the observable universe. Everything that your physical eyes see is of this observable world. وَأَمَّا الْقَلْبِ, as for the heart, فَلَيْسَ مِنْ هَذَا الْعَالَمِ, it's not from this world. لَكِنَّهُ مِنْ عَالَمِ الْغَيْبِ, it is from the unseen realm. فهو في هذا العالم غريب, and in this world it is a stranger. It doesn't belong to this world. And this is one of the reasons why some of the ulama say that the reason why we sleep is because the heart needs to return back to its world. It's not of this world. It has to sort of go back every once in a while and then come back to this reality. And people who don't sleep have a psychological manifestation or a disorder. They get cranky, they can't think straight, they become grumpy and anger. They're not able to control themselves because the heart is not conditioned to last too long in this world. So all these people who say, oh, I just get like 45 minutes of sleep and I'm a successful businessman and all that, it's really amazing how they're actually able to conduct themselves. But they actually turn out to be the scum of the earth in that regard, because it manifests their negative qualities. They are arrogant, they are cranky, they think themselves above everyone, and so on and so forth. وَتِلْكَ الْقِطْعَةُ اللَّحْمِيَةُ مَرْكَبَهُ. The fleshy organ is just its vessel. It's so that the spiritual heart is being housed, or as a vessel, it occupies the physical heart. وَكُلَّ أَعْضَاءِ الْجَسَدِ عَسَاكِرُهُ وَهُوَ الْمَلِكُ. And all the bodily organs or the limbs are its soldiers, and it is the king. وَمَعْرِفَةُ اللَّهِ وَمُشَاهَدَةُ جَمَالُ الْحَضْرَةِ صِفَاتُهُ. And the knowledge of Allah and witnessing the Jamal, the majesty of His presence, of His divine presence, is its attribute. In other words, the heart was designed to witness the presence of Allah. And this goes back again to the ayah where He says, وَمَا خَلَقْتُ الْجِنَّ وَالْإِنسَ إِلَّا لِيَعْبُدُونَ. I did not create jinn or mankind except to serve me. And in order to serve Him, you have to know Him. You have to be acclimatized to His presence to serve Him and to worship Him. وَالتَّكْلِيفُ عَلَيْهِ. And all the responsibilities are on the qalb. They are on the self. And this is also one of the reasons why if you're in a state of sleep, there is no... you're not held accountable for it, because you're not consciously present in this world at that time. So whatever happens to your body, whatever your body does, you're not held accountable for it in that state. And that's another reason why intoxicants are prohibited, because you cannot use that as an excuse that I did all these grievous sins because I was in a delusional state. You actually put yourself in a delusional state, and now you're using that as an excuse. It doesn't work, right? وَالْخِطَابُ مَعَهُ. And this speech, this divine speech of Allah, is meant for the heart. It's supposed to touch the heart. It's strictly for the heart's understanding. وَلَهُ الثَّوَابُ وَعَلَيْهَا الْعِقَابُ. And to it is all the reward, and also upon it is the punishment, the iqab. It's the heart that is going to face that punishment. وَالسَّعَادَةُ وَالشِّقَاءُ تَلْحَقَانِهِ. Okay. And the eternal happiness, or the eternal suffering or grief, or that sorrow, that angst, or that the person who became a demonic state is going to suffer, and as well as all the happiness and the khair and the shar that the person experiences in this world, they follow the heart. It's the heart that ultimately experiences it. وَالرُّوحُ الْحَيَوَانِ فِي كُلِّ شَيْءٍ تَبْعَهُ وَمَعَهُ. The animal spirit, I'll explain this term. The animal spirit in every affair, in everything, is subservient to it and is with it. The animal spirit is, and this is the term that Saleh was using from Ibn Khaldun's that paragraph, that extract. The Ruh al-Hayawani is what they call the vital spirit, or the animals, the thing that makes things alive, that animates things. In the Chinese terminology, they call it the Qi, right? Or the living spirit. It's what allows the body to be alive. So when the Ruh is removed, the body dies. It can no longer function. It can no longer, because Allah who is sustaining the body, and He's sustaining it through the Ruh. So this animal spirit, the Ruh, follows it wherever the heart goes, or wherever it desires to go or intends to go, in time or in space, and is also subservient to it. and you can use, and there are people who have been able to access this animal spirit or power in that sense to give them that inner strength. There's one story I remember Sheikh Hamza was recounting. He was with Dr. Omar Farouk, and they were driving and they came across an accident. There's a car that had overturned and there was someone inside it, and the emergency services hadn't arrived yet, and it was, I don't know, it was a spur of the moment or something, and the old man, Dr. Omar Farouk is older than Sheikh Hamza, he lifted the car, and Sheikh Hamza pulled the guy out, which is, it's amazing in that moment when you need the strength, that strength actually comes out. And this is what the ancient Chinese martial arts also strive to practice and arrive at through all the degrees, until you arrive whereby they say you unlock your chi, or you have that inner power that really gives you the strength that your body doesn't have, right? ومعرفة حقيقته ومعرفة صفاته مفتاح معرفة الله سبحانه وتعالى. To know is its reality, and to know is its attribute, and the key or the opening to knowing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. فَعَلَيْكَ مُجَاهَدَتِي حَتَّى تَعْرِفَهُ. It is upon you to continue this jihad, this struggle, until you come to know Him, until you come to know Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. لأنه جوهر عزيز من جنس جوهر الملائكة. It is because it is a precious essence from the genus of the essences of the angels. The genus is the group or the overall category in the 5 predicables. So the genes of the human being in the material world, as far as the body is concerned, is that we are part of the animal kingdom. And then what differentiates us from the animal is our ability to think and to speak. So the logicians define the human being as hayawanun natiq, the speaking animal, or hayawanul aqil, the rational animal, the thinking animal. That's as far as the body is concerned, or our physical world is concerned. As for the heart, its essence is precious, and it's from the jinns of the malaika. It's from the spiritual category, or from the spiritual world. وَأَصْلُ مَعْدِنِهِ مِنَ الْحَضْرَةُ الْإِلَهِيَّةِ. Its asl is from the presence of the Lord, of Allah, the divine presence. It came from that divine presence. Min dhalika makani jaa, it came from that makan, from that realm. Wa ila dhalika makani yaud, and it is going to return to that realm, or that divine presence. That makan is the divine presence. And that was his chapter on how you would understand the self. What he's trying to say is that you understand the self by understanding the heart and its nature. And when you understand the heart, then you understand what is the self in relation to the heart then. If the heart is the innermost dimension of the human being, then what is the role of the self? And that's what he's going to now, when he talks about, the next chapter is haqiqatul qalb. He's going to talk about the reality of the heart.
One heart to another? Is it first through the emotions and then turn into thoughts and then into words? Or is it thoughts then emotions?
It would be either thoughts or emotions, or a combination of two, and that's why they're in the same location, because you can't have thoughts without emotions, and you can't have emotions without thoughts. Your thoughts have to be emotionally driven. They're either happy thoughts or sad thoughts or somber thoughts or whatever thoughts they might be. And the same goes for emotions. You can't actually have an emotion without any thought attached to it, because otherwise it's an empty emotion, right? It's a meaningless emotion. So they always go hand in hand. And the way, to your question, how that meaning is transferred from one heart to another heart, is that it will exit the human being from that inner dimension through the organs, which are the, as he says, asakir. They are the soldiers, and the heart is the malik, it's the ruler. So the tongue is a soldier, the throat, the vocal cords, the speech component in the brain that formulates or regulates the motion of the tongue and everything. And the Arabs say, al-lisanu tarjumanul qalb. The tongue is the translator of the heart. So the thoughts and emotions will then embed themselves with the words that you know, and then they will come out in terms of speech. And then the other person is going to take those words, either through listening to them or through reading them. And since you both have a common understanding of what those words mean, will be able to put them together, and then those thoughts and emotions will enter into their heart, and then they will understand what you understood, or they'll feel what you feel, or they will experience what you experienced. Okay, we have less than a minute. You want to take a break, come back for question answer session, and then we can do Haqiqatul Qalb maybe tomorrow, inshallah.
Let me look over my notes.
One thing I can say just for a quick moment, though, you can agree that, well, I don't know if you agree or disagree with this. The jinn cannot affect the qalb.
That's a good point, and I agree with you on that.
You should repeat what you said about the perceiving with the inner eye.
Yeah, that's what Salih was asking. So Salih, what was your question on the?
I said that the jinn, they can't influence your qalb.
Okay, they can influence your qalb. What they don't have access to is what's inside the qalb, what's inside the heart. So Allah says in Surah An-Nahl, which is I think many people know this ayah number 90. فَإِذَا قَرَأْتَ الْقُرْآنَ فَاسْتَعِذْ بِاللَّهِ مِنَ الشَّيْطَانِ الرَّجِيمِ. When you want to recite the Quran, seek refuge with Allah from the cursed demon, Shaitan al-Rajim. He's referring to Iblis categorically and all his minions. But then he says, إِنَّهُ لَيْسَ لَهُ سُلْطَانٌ عَلَى الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا وَعَلَى رَبِّهِمْ يَتَوَكَّلُونَ. He doesn't have any authority on those who believe and those who have taqwa or reliance upon their Lord. Now, it's interesting because the Arabs defined Iman, and tawakkul goes hand in hand with that, as primarily as a conviction in the heart. Imam Al-Laqani says in his versification on Tawheed, وَفُسِّرَ الْإِيمَانُ بِالتَّصْدِيقِ, that Iman is essentially defined as tasdeeq, and tasdeeq is ratification in the heart. The aqada, which is to tie a knot, which is where aqidah comes from, is to make sure that there are no gaps in that ratification, so that the Iman is sort of rock solid. It doesn't have any loopholes, any gaps.
You said knot?
Aqada, a knot, like you tie a rope and you tie a knot. Yeah, aqada, ayn, qaf, dal, and that's where aqidah comes from. So the heart itself is protected. And your thoughts and your emotions and your intellections, your imaginatives, all the faculties of your mind, everything inside the heart is protected. No one has access to that. No one, literally no one in the entire creation has access to that except yourself. Only you have access to it, and Allah has access to it. No one else has access to what's in you. And this is why when you're communicating with others, you have to speak, right? People can't just quote unquote read your mind. They don't know what's going on inside you. You have to speak, you have to articulate, you have to be able to bring it out. And the same applies to the jinn, or to the devils, to the demons. They don't have access to your thoughts. They don't know what you're thinking. They don't know what you're feeling. They don't know unless you exhibit them in the outward sense. It's one of the reasons also why some of the spiritual ulama, they say that you should avoid trying to manifest your sorrows in the outward sense, like showing that you're really depressed, and it's something that the shayateen among the humankind can use against you, but the demons in the jinn world can also use against you. And also one of the reasons why in other cultures also this is applied, where they say don't speak into the darkness, because you never know who's listening, right? And that's because of this particular thing. The moment you bring it out into the world, then they know what's going on inside you. What they do have access to is to cast an influence. And they do that in the same way that you receive your information that goes into the heart. So the waswasa is not literally a whispering in the ear. It's more of a, they're throwing stones in that metaphoric sense. They're throwing stones, hoping that it will hit your heart. And you might take that into consideration as a doubt. And it might influence your current thought in some way, shape, or form. And so they know certain things about you. Like they know that if it's 1 o'clock, you're going to go and do wudu and you're going to pray your salah. So that's when he's going to come around and try to divert your attention through distractions. Oh, look at this. Oh, did you think about that? Right. And then try to steer you off course. And this is what he says. I believe is it Surah Al-A'raf. He says that he says أنا خير منهم. Then he says قال فاحبط, get out of here. فأنذرني إلى يوم القيامة إلى يوم يبعثون. Now that's really interesting. He's saying, see me, or in this case, reprieve me. This is an older speech form. Like, let me see you to the door, or see me to the door, like, right? So take me all the way there in that sense. So فَأَنذِرْنِي إِلَى يَوْمِ يُبْعَثُونَ, take me until, now he says يُبْعَثُونَ, they are resurrected. So some argue that it's a strong point of argument again on that Iblis did not actually disbelieve. His kufr is not the kufr of rejection. It is the kufr of disobedience, and that he actually believes in Allah. He believes Allah exists. He believes the malaika exist. He believes in the resurrection. So he is recognizing that there will be a resurrection. But again, his arrogance comes into play in between, that he's saying until they are resurrected, instead of saying that I'm not going to be resurrected. He's sort of he knows he'll be resurrected, but he's sort of defying that. It's a defiance of Iblis. And then he says, then Allah says, innaka minal mundarin, you are among those who will be reprived till then. Then he says, fabima aghwaytani, since you misguided me, la'aqudanna lahum siratakal mustaqim, I will sit and wait for them on your straight path. In other words, any action that you tell them to do, because that's the straight path. The straight path is doing what your Lord has commanded you to do. And that was what the test on Adam was. It wasn't about the tree or it having super special powers or anything. It was a simple matter of, are you going to obey me if I tell you not to do it? No matter how tempting it seems to you. So the straight path, Siratul Mustaqim, is the path of obedience to Allah. So he's going to wait along that way. Any action that is a component of that straight path, he's going to wait along the way and try to deviate you off or to throw you off. So he knows that come the 28th of Shawwal, of Shaban, you're going to go out and look at the moon. So he'll try his best to try and deter you from doing that. You're going to try and wake up suhoor. He'll try his best to try and prevent you from doing that. Every action that leads you to the obedience of Allah, he's going to try and deviate you across. And the more you deviate, the better his chances of throwing more doubts in along the way, to now not only deviate you from the path, but to also force you to now do actions that are not part of the straight path. And this goes to speaking to a weak heart. A heart that's weak is more prone to whispers. And this is also psychological. People who have a weak integrity in themselves, they are easily brought down. They're easily humiliated. And this is what he seeks to do, or this is what the jinn essentially seek to do, is to humiliate you as much as they can. ثُمَّ لَآتِيَنَّهُمْ مِنْ بَيْنِ أَيْدِيهِمْ وَمِنْ خَلْفِهِمْ وَعَنْ أَيْمَانِهِمْ وَعَنْ شَمَائِلِهِمْ. See, he says that I am going to then come to them in front of them, from in front, from behind, from the right, and from the left. But he did not say from above or from below. I believe Sheikh Hamza says an interesting thing on that. He says that he can't come from above because that's where guidance comes from. And he can't come from below because he would never bring himself to a lower maqam than the human being. So your best escape is to maintain that guidance and to ensure that you are always humble. Because Iblis will never take a humble stance. The jinn will never take a humble stance. And this is what, these two components are what strengthen the heart. Having that access to the divine. The above here doesn't mean like up from here, right? Like towards the ceiling. It means above in rank. Towards the samawats, towards the arsh, where the guidance is coming from.
You're basically in Islam, everything surrounds the heart. Like the best thing you can do is purify your heart. It's funny how in their ideologies, they go through basically the 7 chakras. And basically, when the crown, once you get your crown on your head, is when you reach enlightenment. It's kind of like arrogant, kind of, that, you get your crown, and, the last chakra is your crown, and the heart is like the 3rd level down. And recently, I've changed my conception of it. I changed it to basically, it was the eyes. So basically, you go up to the crown, and then you become humble, and then you can see, right? So I changed what they were talking, but now I see it's actually even don't go lower and go to the heart.
The lower and the more inward you go, the closer you get to your heart. And he says in Surah Shams, I believe, وَالنَّفْسٍ وَمَا سَوَّاهَا. Is it Surah Shams? وَالنَّفْسٍ وَمَا سَوَّاهَا.
Yes, that's correct.
Surah Shams, yeah. وَالنَّفْسٍ وَمَا سَوَّاهَا. I'm tired right now. What's the next ayah? فَأَلْهَمَهَا فُجُورَهَا وَتَقْوَاهَا قَدْ أَفْلَهَا مَنْ زَكَّاهَا وَقَدْ خَابَ مَنْ دَسَّاهَا. The nafs and its proportion, he has proportioned it. And he has given it or taught it what is right and what is wrong, or what is good and evil. The nafs knows what is good and evil. This is going into the fitrah. The fitrah in its nature knows how to distinguish good from evil. That's why you might not know it's an evil thing, but then when it takes place, you feel it in your heart, like this it doesn't work for me, right? And you go into an evil environment and you just feel like you're in a negative environment. And he says, قَدْ أَفْلَهَا مَنْ زَكَّاهَا. The one who succeeds or finds success is the one who purifies it. وَقَدْ خَابَ مَنْ دَسَّاهَا. The loser, the one who gets failure, is the one who dasa. Dasa is to drive a wedge. It's to interrupt something from its natural progression. So the fitrah has a natural inclination of progression towards good, in avoidance of evil. And when you interrupt that, and this is what they do, this is what the shayateen do, is to interrupt that, to divert you from that. The person who allows that to happen to themselves, the Prophet said that a believer should never humiliate themselves. And arguably, people can't actually humiliate you until you allow them to humiliate you. So in other words, you allow yourself to be misguided. And again, that goes back to the heart, where and the diseases of the heart, right? في قلوبهم مرض فزادهم الله مرض. They have فزادهم الله مرضا. They have a disease in their heart, and Allah increases that disease. And then elsewhere He says, فلما زاغوا أزاغ الله قلوبهم أزاغ الله قلوبهم. They have a perversion, a deviation, and Allah causes them to deviate even further. The idea of causing them to deviate is that He allows them to continue deviating themselves without giving them any guidance. Because ultimately, the heart can only purify itself with guidance. You cannot purify yourself just based on your own rationale of what you think is right and wrong, or your own intellection. It has to be guided. And that guidance can only come from Allah. So when He withdraws that guidance, then the deviation continues going further and further, or the diseases increase more and more. And that makes the heart weaker and weaker, and makes it more prone to the devilish whispers. Such people are also more prone, statistically speaking, to be possessed or to have witchcraft done on them. And in most cases, the wizards, the sorcerers, in this case, it can also happen on a global scale or a large scale. They don't actually have to send the jinn to do the work for them. They can just put the instruments in place, and these people can easily get enchanted by that. The worst thing, a disease that can happen to the heart, is to forget its true reality and be enticed by a material reality. And so most people are in that state of ghafla. أُولَٰئِكَ هُمُ الْغَافِلُونَ, right? In Surah Al-A'raf, لَقَدْ ذَرَأْنَا لِجَهَنَّمَ كَثِيرًا مِنَ الْجِنِّ وَالْإِنسِ. Jahannam has been created for many of these. And the first thing He says is, لَهُمْ قُلُوبُهُمْ لَا يَفْقَهُونَ بِهَا. They have hearts, but they don't want to understand. لَهُمْ أَعْيُنٌ لَا يُبْصِرُونَ بِهَا. They have eyes, but they don't see. لَهُمْ أَذَانٌ لَا يَسْمَعُونَ بِهَا. They have ears, but they don't want to listen. Then He says, أُولَٰئِكَ كَالْأَنْعَامِ. They are just like cattle. And this is the rhetoric. This is a rhetoric in Arabic. You give a statement and then you negate that statement with what you actually want to say, right? So أُولَٰئِكَ كَالْأَنْعَامِ. Then He says, بَلْ هُمْ أَضَلُّ. No, they're worse than cattle and livestock. أُولَٰئِكَ هُمُ الْغَافِلُونَ. They're completely heedless. They're like lost. They have no idea where they are, who they are, what they're supposed to do. They're just enchanted by everything around them. Because cattle and livestock are doing what they're supposed to do, what they were created to do. But the human being in this regard is not doing what it's supposed to do. He's not doing what Ghazali is saying that you should do, to understand your true reality, your inner reality, so that you can perfect yourself and purify yourself, because you will be returning to that divine presence. You want to return in the best character possible. Otherwise, you will not be permitted in that presence. In terms of now going back to Salih's question on that, the casting of the doubt of the jinn, it can happen in a multitude of ways. They can either interfere with the algorithmic flow of information from the senses going into the brain and then being interpreted by the mind and then comprehended by the heart. I'm putting that in a linear progression, but it's not actually linear in that case, because it all happens in the same instance. Like you actually see in real time and comprehend in real time as well. That means the processing is taking place in real time as well, and the intellection is taking place in real time. I'm just breaking it down in linear progression. So your eyes see, your brain computes that data information of color, texture, frequency, light intensity, color temperature, and all those things, all that information. And then the brain computes all that information. That is raw data. I'm using contemporary terms. The intellect interprets that data. Say, oh, this is what I'm looking at. And then the heart comprehends that. And you formulate an understanding in the heart of what it is that you're looking at. For a person who's possessed, or whose heart is not strong, or whose intellect is not refined, they can interrupt in that chain, in that algorithmic chain, and put in information that's not relevant to true reality, to either confuse you or confound you, to create doubt. Doubt is the biggest thing. That's the dasa, right? Dasaha. That's the dasa. If they drive a wedge in between to break the flow of true reality or comprehending true reality. The doubt is the thing that actually creates or triggers a different chain or a different modus of thinking that takes you down a different path, because then you're going through a different algorithm altogether. So somebody can look at what's happening right now. It's much more complex, and we can't really simplify the last year and a half and all the fitna into one sentence. But you could someone can look at all that and say, this is what the government is saying. This is what the WHO is saying. This is what CDC is saying. And they all seem to be saying the same thing. Now, for an individual who only focuses on the dhahir, on the outward elements of it, the science, right, which is what they're saying, trust in the science. Well, what science are they referring to? It's material science. So we're supposed to trust material science is what they're saying. And what they're presenting is material science. They're not presenting a metaphysical aspect. They're not giving you an ontological explanation. There are hidden elements taking place behind this material science that they're not telling us. But these people who have no depth of perception, لهم قلوبهم لا يفقهون بها لهم أعين لا يبصرون بها. It's basar, it's not ra'a, right? It's not nadar, it's basar. Like you see more than you see what you see in the outward, and then you penetrate it deeper and see with the inward. So they're only looking at the outward and they say, oh, okay, this is saying the same thing, not saying the same thing, so it must be true. So why should I believe anyone else? I might as well get my shot today, right? And then they just go on with the flow, like cattle. Because they're not thinking for themselves, somebody else is doing the thinking for them. The jinn can come in between that and throw that wedge in between and say, no, it is the truth. I mean, it's either this or you listen to conspiracy theories. Right? So that's where the doubt comes in, and then they say, okay, I think, yeah, this sounds like a better option. And they just carry on in that same flow.
I have a question about what you said before. You said the jinn can't see what's in your heart or your mind unless you speak it or show a reaction to what they whisper. But what about when you're possessed, like a real possession, and also what about when you're intoxicated by, drugs and, psychedelics and stuff? Are they able to see in your mind since you took the thing into your body, or when they jumped into your body by possession? Are they still not able to see your heart, or is it just still whispers?
They still can't see your heart. But the issue here is that in a state of intoxication, since you no longer have control over your thoughts or emotions or your limbs and their actions, and that includes the tongue as well, so people just say whatever they feel like saying. That's all information that they use. Now, the interesting thing about jinn is that they're not creative beings. They don't have the same intellection level or interpretive level that human beings have to interpret symbols and understand a deeper reality from them. So if you give a jinn a blank piece of paper, it has no idea what to do with it. Like you give a human being a blank piece of paper, like a child will draw amazing things just from imagination. Jinn don't have that ability. But if you give a jinn a piece of paper with information on it, or it has a field day. It can do anything because it's more sharper in that field.
Well, what if you're thinking about something, right? You're thinking about concepts and things, and then a random like bad concept or like haram concept or something bad, but it's related to that concept.
Mm-hmm.
How would they whisper that unless they could like see kind of like, sense what they're thinking?
So not all bad thoughts are from the jinn. There are actually 4 primary sources of thoughts. There is shaitaniya, then there is nafsiya, from the self, and then there are malakiya, and then there are rabbaniya. The rabbaniya thoughts they can come in the form of true dreams and visions, but they can also come as a strong impulse to just do something good. The malakiya thoughts are more of a suggestion to do good. So you're praying fard, and then you get a thought, I should pray sunnah as well. Then after a while you get a thought, I should also pray nafil, and then you just do it. It's like a suggestion. The nafsiya thoughts can be 2 ways, can fall in either. This is why the nafs is in between. It can be affected by both worlds.
So corrupted nafs could even corrupt its own nafs even further.
Yes, and that's what it means. Like there's a sickness in the heart, or there's a perversion in the heart, Allah leads them even further astray. So they continue. It's like a compounding effect. And some of those thoughts, they may be pure evil thoughts, but they're actually not from the jinn. They're from yourself. And there's one of the reasons why shaitan will say, I didn't make you do anything. If at all, I suggested it. But even that was not my suggestion. You thought it out yourself. Now, it's possible that the contingency in terms of the causal link of how that thought actually came to be formed might lead back to a prior thought. And there might be no relation between the two, but there is a sort of a chain that leads to that. And that may have been from a demonic source. So Sheikh Hamza, in I think it's there on YouTube. You guys should check it out. It's a single lecture on Zaytuna's YouTube page. The concept of isnad. It's a beautiful lecture he's given. And he suggests that ultimately all of us, all human beings, there's no original thought. That we are either on a chain of, we're all in a chain of isnad. We are all in a chain of transmission. And that chain is either from an angelic source or from a demonic source. And the angelic source then includes Jibril giving the Quran to the Prophet ﷺ, or the Injil to Nabi Isa, or the Torah. So that's the angelic source in its prime. So we are either in this chain or in that chain of transmission. And this, again, philosophically, Heidegger argues in his book, Being, I believe it's called Time and Being. He says that everything in life that you do is influenced by one source or another. The only thing that you do by yourself, without any influence from anyone, is to die. No one can tell you how to die. That's something you experience by yourself. That's the only thing that is not in a chain of transmission. Your time of death and the manner of your death is something you experience completely by yourself. Everything else has got an influence. Yeah.
Before I wrote any of the notes, the first thing I wrote, like I gave yesterday, was blame yourself, and it kind of ended on that note.
Inshallah, we'll do something on the self, on the nafs itself. I guess in a different session, because there are deeper dimensions to the self. So there's the primary an-nafs al-mutma'i, an-nafs al-lamara, an-nafs al-mutma'inna, an-nafs al-lawama. Then there are intermediary stages in between that as well. There is an-nafs al-mulhama, there is an-nafs al-radiya, there is nafs al-mardiya, and then there is nafs al-kamila. Each of those has a different level and a different transition in between them. And then how the mind actually functions. That question that you're asking, I know I'm not doing it justice right now, but inshallah, when we do the aql itself, when you understand how the mind works, then you'll be able to understand how does the jinn interrupt that flow of understanding. How is the doubt added on into that chain of comprehending reality? How does intoxication influence the mind and causes a lapse in judgment? And maybe that will be able to answer your question on the vaccine component itself. Because there's a theory I'm working on, but it's not complete, so I'm not going to talk about it much because I don't have everything in place yet. So inshallah, when I do, then I'll be able to publish my work.
Brother Yakub, what's your opinion? You said, Allah created us to worship Him, and so what is the obligation on us in this time? Do you think hijrah is is kind of like an obligation now, since we have the knowledge to recognize the signs that what's coming is oppression? And in the Quran, the angels talk about the ones who stayed in a place of oppression and died there, and they will say you would be accountable on day judgment because you stayed there with the knowledge knowing you're in oppression, even though the world was expanded for you. Do you think that Muslims should leave the places that are mandating everything, or what do you think we should?
There's multiple ways to look at it, and I prefer not to give anyone a fatwa because that's not my, or I don't have any authority on the religion of Allah. So I prefer not to give anyone a fatwa on anything as to what they should do and what they shouldn't do. The most that I can do is air my opinion as to what I think, and it's something that I'm personally implementing myself. And there are multiple ways to analyze it. You could look at it from a fiqh perspective and derive a ruling as to what you should do. And that's what the term you're using is obligation. Like, what's the obligation? That would be from a fiqh perspective. You could look at it from an usuli perspective. You could look at it from a philosophical perspective. You can also look at it from an eschatological perspective. The ulama have given various reasons as to why doing hijrah is prohibited, and other reasons as to why doing hijrah is permissible. And this goes back to the hadith that you'll find in all the books of hadith, إِنَّمَا الْأَعْمَالُ بِالنِّيَّاتِ. Whoever migrated for the sake of Allah and His Messenger migrated for the sake of Allah and His Messenger. Whoever migrated for dunya or wealth or to marry someone or whatever it is that it's not even worth mentioning it. Yeah, he didn't repeat that term either. He said that's what he migrated for. So contingent on the niyyah of migration, if migration is what you feel like in this realm that I am in this country that I am in, I feel like my faith is being threatened, my Islam is being threatened, and that's the oppression I'm experiencing, then you have that leniency under Islam to make hijrah to where you believe you will be able to practice your religion in freedom. And that's the angle that I'm taking personally, because I'm not just looking at it from a Shari'i perspective, I'm also looking at it from philosophical and eschatological perspectives. I'm seeing not my present suffering right now. I'm looking at 10 years from now as far as my children are concerned. And if I can get them out right now, to take them to an environment where their Islam will be preserved as well, because I don't know if I'll be alive tomorrow, but where they can be safe from all the indoctrination, because I feel from an eschatological perspective and a philosophical perspective, the greatest battle that's being fought is an ideological war. It's not about the physical elements. They can oppress and continue to oppress and even jail us for that matter. The ulama said as long as we have water and qibla, there's nothing they can do to us. So they can torture us, our bodies, until we die, as long as our iman is strong. But where the iman is being threatened, and with children, it's hard to say, because we grew up in a completely different generation. Our parents grew up in a completely different generation. That's unprecedented in human history, that you've got 3 generations that are completely diverse. It's never happened in human history. So considering that alone, that there is a change that is taking place that we can't change or control, and our children are going to suffer for it, then it's better to change that environment. Because you will be asked at the end of the day, why did you indulge in that activity? Why did you take a riba? Why did you take a loan on mortgage? Oh, I needed a house, blah, blah, blah. I need a place to stay. And the angels will ask you, there was nowhere else you could go in all of God's green earth where you could have lived. You had to take that route. You have an option to avoid that, then I say take that option to avoid it. But don't take it because you're afraid of a vaccination, or you're afraid of losing your job, or there's a better income over there, or there's a better lifestyle over there. Make sure that your niyyah is in the right place, and Allah will guide you in accordance. And this was the niyyah of the Ashab al-Kahf, right? رَبَّنَا آتِنَا مِن لَدُنْكَ رَحْمَةً وَهَيِّئْ لَنَا مِنْ أَمْرِنَا رَشَدًا. We're surrendering our affair to you. Our amr is in your hands now, so you guide us. If our guidance is to stay here, we'll stay here. If it is to go, we will go. If it is to return back to the city, we'll return back to the city. So I would say do that and evaluate yourself within. Because from an eschatological angle, you only have 3 options. You either make hijrah, you stay and fight if you're Dhul Qarnayn, or you increase yourself in knowledge and protect yourself from within. Those are the only 3 options that are available to us. And if you look at Surah Al-Kahf, there is really no other option that we can look at. Either you follow the path of the Ashab al-Kahf, or you follow the path of Musa and try your utmost to reach a level of spiritual enlightenment, which is not an easy task for people living in this world, in our present world of modernity. Or you take the path of Dhul Qarnayn if you are able to, and you have the might and the power and the resources to fight back. And there are people who are fighting back, and there are people who are resisting, but there are many who can't. So you really have to evaluate your own positions and your own situations and circumstances. And it's not a matter of what does the fiqh say, or what does the madhab say, or what does the usul say, or what does Mufti Maulana say. And that's not what it's about. This is an age of fitna, in that it's not a clear-cut definition. You can't just find a clear-cut rule that will help you decide on what you should do and what you shouldn't do. There has to be a level of deep reflection, deep thinking. You really have to do some self-contemplation and evaluation. Ultimately, I always say to people, yes, it's a difficult time that we're living in, but irrespective of the time that you're living in, the thing that you really need to look out for, that you really need to understand, that you really need to figure out, is what is your purpose? Why do you exist? It's not something that people don't think about. Why do we exist? Why do I exist? Ask yourself that question. What is my purpose of being in this world? It doesn't matter what time and age you exist in. You've been chosen to exist in this world of modernity with all this fitna. There will be future generations who will most likely face worse than that, worse than what we're facing. There are previous generations who faced maybe, if not the same, worse than what we're facing. It's possible. They persevered. There were some who were destroyed. And if death is written for you, wherever it is written for you, whenever it is written for you, you can't escape it. So even if you think about making hijrah because you're afraid of what's going to happen when they inject you, that's not something you should be concerned about. What you should be really concerned about is whatever time you have remaining in this world, what are you doing to ensure that you maximize that time? Because ultimately it's your heart that is going to be questioned, not your body. They can inject whatever they want to inject in your bodies and ruin the bodies. But the heart, that's what you need to solidify. Yes, it might be an oppression on you. And yes, they will be questioned about it, but that's not going to exempt you from your lack of developing yourself. Whatever they inject you with, whatever they do to you, they are held accountable for their actions. But if your heart has not been solidified, if you're a weak individual in your faith, if you're a weak individual in your sense perception, in your understanding of reality, understanding of your existence, understanding of your purpose, what does it matter? Because they will pay for their actions, but what about you? You're going to pay for your negligence of yourself. So this is what he's talking about. This is what Ghazali is saying and the purpose of writing this book. Now think about it. He wrote this 1,000 years ago, or close to 800 years ago. How does it affect us today? I mean, whatever that I've read is exactly what he wrote. And that's what it is. And you can apply that in the same circumstance wherever you are, because it's a universal. It's not a particular. He's not talking about fiqh. He's talking about a universal concept. It doesn't matter what your circumstances are. In the end, you have to look inward. Wherever you are, whatever your outward circumstances might be, and they will affect you, undoubtedly. The environment does affect you. So, ultimately, the decision you have to make for yourself is, if I'm going to make hijrah, what is my niyyah of making hijrah? Is it to escape some sort of discomfort that will arise from it? Or is it so that I can preserve my iman, I can preserve my deen, and I can carry on in my servitude to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, where I don't have to worry about all these things? Then by all means, make your hijrah. But don't make hijrah based on you thinking that wherever you're going to go, you're going to get an amazing job where you're going to make a lot of money. It's going to be a lovely beach house that you're going to get for yourself. Don't let that be the reason for you making hijrah. And ideally, additionally, do not let their atrocities be a reason for you to make hijrah. Don't run away from them because of you fearing something they might do to you. The Sahaba had to endure almost 10 years of persecution, torture beyond imagination for us. We're softies compared to that. You know, these people, they lived in the harsh desert environment without any of the comforts we have here, and they had to suffer torture on top of that. But they suffered for 10 years before they left, and when they left, that's when this hadith was sent down. For the one who made hijrah for the sake of Allah and His Messenger, he made hijrah for the sake of Allah and His Messenger. But for the one who made hijrah to accumulate wealth or to get married or to whatever, then it is to whatever he made his hijrah to. And that's his acquisition. So anyway, let's end here inshallah because it's getting late. سبحانك وبحمدك لا إله إلا أنت نستغفرك ونتوب إليك ربنا تقبل منا إنك أنت السميع العليم وتب علينا يا مولانا إنك أنت التواب الرحيم برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين بارك الله فيكم والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله